This is the instrument panel for my 1986 Chevy M1008 truck. What I'm going to be doing with this, in this part of the project, is I'd like to draw your attention to this here. This is actually a voltmeter. This is what the military had put in. It's pretty simple. No actual information other than a green band and a yellow band and two red bands. Anybody can read it. It's pretty handy, I guess. But it doesn't give enough information for my tastes. So what I'm going to be doing is installing a voltmeter that's actually calibrated in volts. And this will give me more information about the operation of the charging system on the vehicle. So that's kind of the overview of this sub-project, and we'll continue on the next stage. Here's a picture of the voltmeter that I purchased that I'd like to use. It's a nice voltmeter made by a VDO. And it reads voltages in the range of 18 to 32 volts. Since this is a military vehicle and the electrical system on it operates at a nominal 24 volts, this meter will suit my purposes perfectly. The next step in the process, I remove the panel from the dash panel itself, and then I'm going to remove the existing gauge. So far so good. This panel is a simple sheet metal panel that Chevrolet manufactured specifically for this military vehicle. So I wish to preserve this panel as much as is possible while still achieving my goal of adding the additional functionality of a gauge that actually reads in volts directly. From now, or I should say from here, I'm going to move on to the next step, which is going to be cutting another hole next to the original to fit the new gauge in. Therefore, I preserve the original gauge, but I'll have the gauge that gives me the information I want as well. So stay tuned, and I'll show you how I go about doing that. The next logical step in the voltmeter installation, at least for me, is to take the new voltmeter and open it up. Now it's open. And the first thing that I do, and I'm sure you all do the same, is to pull out the instruction sheet that came with the voltmeter. Prominently displayed on the back is a parts list. Now, reading the parts list, this obviously comes with a 2 1/16 inch voltmeter, a lamp socket for illumination, and a 12 volt light bulb. Good, because the electrical system in the truck is 24 volts, but the interior equipment in the vehicle all runs on 12 volts, so my dash lighting is all 12 volts. So this gauge will monitor the 24 volt electrical system, but the dash light will work on 12 volts. Fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted. Now, unfortunately, I don't believe too much of anything that I read. And Maybe you're the same way, maybe not. In this case, it worked in my favor. I removed the bulb assembly from the gauge, took the bulb out, and strained my eyes to read the bulb. The bulb clearly said 24 volts. Imagine that. So I tested the bulb on a 12 volt battery, and sure enough, it was very dim. It was in fact a 24 volt bulb. So I went in the drawer and I pulled out a good old-fashioned number 168 12 volt dash light, put it in, repeated the test on the battery, and found that it was an acceptable level of brightness. So much for believing everything you read. I also checked the measurement of the diameter of the gauge to make sure that it would in fact fit in a 2 1/16 inch hole. And the measurement did agree with what the paperwork said. I guess I tend to believe in trust but verify, and it's always worked pretty well for me. So now, having done that, I'm ready to move on to actually making the hole in the plate to accept a new gauge. Hang in there. I'm not sure how you guys would address this problem, but for me, I think I'll try the vertical mill. It's my go-to machine. So what I've done is I've mounted the gauge panel in the mill with a piece of wood backing it up, and then I'm using a dial indicator to pick up the center of the existing gauge hole. That way the voltmeter that I'm putting in will be on the same center line as that hole is, therefore it'll look reasonably good. At least that's what I hope. So at this point I've pretty much got the part centered where I want it to be. I'm going to clamp it in and do a few calculations and figure out where the other hole will go. And when I get to that point, I'll show you how I do that. Okay, I've changed the clamping arrangement a little bit. The noise in the background is the three-phase converter, and kind of hoping that I've got it clamped well enough that it doesn't try and play helicopter. But we'll see. It'll be kind of fun. Alright, no guts, no glory. By the way, a hole saw is a pretty good way to remove a lot of material pretty quick. And they're pretty inexpensive too. There we have it. Now for a little better shot of that. We have a hole. So, that's the first step. Now let me clean this up a little bit with a vacuum and then take a quick measurement on it, and we'll see if it's big enough to fit the gauge. If it's not, then we'll have to go to another, take other measures to make sure that it'll fit. Hang in there. Alright, that's kind of how they turned out. The hole saw worked okay. Hole saws have two not so good qualities. Number one, they never ever drill a hole on size, ever. And then the other thing is they leave kind of a rat-chewed finish, which for some jobs is okay. Usually I'll follow a hole saw with a boring bar and clean everything up nice. In this case, it wasn't necessary. Just about 15 or 20 minutes with the file, and I was able to deburr the hole and get it right. So that's kind of what it looks like. On the back side, let's see here if I can show you. Yeah, you see all where all the scratches are in the paint from filing and stuff. So now what I'm going to do is I'll take the part and take it over by the over to the sandblaster, and we'll clean it up. Look at that, a little pipe related content. So off to the sandblaster, and then a fresh coat of paint, and it should be ready to install in the vehicle. Stay tuned. Well, that's what the panel looks like after it's been sandblasted. It turned out okay. GM sure located that first hole in an odd place. So I couldn't move it over, so I was kind of stuck with working with what I had. But it'll be okay. I'm trying to decide whether to paint it flat black or olive drab. Kind of leaning towards the olive drab. But anyway, I'll paint it up and show it to you when it's done. Okay guys, here's the final shot of it, actually in the vehicle and installed. And there it is. So it actually works. So there you have it. That's it. Thanks.